is podcasting. Basically, it's any pre-recorded content that you put up that people can download and listen to at any given time. They can choose when they want to listen to it. Podcasting, talking about COVID, Barry, during the COVID restrictions, podcasting really exploded as one way for businesses and content developers to reach an audience that wasn't going out, and shopping at businesses and stuff like that. So it increased during COVID, and it hasn't stopped. There are podcasts literally about anything you can imagine. I mean, really, but there are, within reason. So why would you want to have a podcast to begin with? You just go down the table and ask, why are you interested in doing a podcast? And hopefully I'll be answering all your questions before we leave today. When we're done, I want you to feel fairly comfortable doing your own podcast, maybe with a little help. Okay? It's like playing music. It's either as easy as you want to make it or as hard as you want to make it. But you can decide how hard it's going to be. The using the hardware, the scary part is all right here. And we're going to take a look at it. It's not magic. I come from radio. Most of the people in radio are really, really, really stupid. Really stupid. So if they can do this, anyone can. Okay? Y'all are all smart people. You won't have any trouble at all. One of the reasons let's go down the line and see, why are you interested in podcasting?
Research what is available, especially for American people that grew up here and they don't see. There are so many things that you can go ahead and do. So I want to motivate everyone.
Perfect.
Understanding identity. So in order to bring in people, most give them confidence. They can get behind the mic, they can be creative, they can continuously buy something. And that's going to open up the door to helping.
Right. And the key to doing that is being comfortable. Right. Careful. The only way to be comfortable with the process. You're actively making a podcast and recording, you shouldn't feel like you're juggling 3 balls. It shouldn't feel that way. If it does, you need to step back and review and go back over it isn't that hard. But,
so my part is simple, like marketing, education, but what we do, and I also love to
okay, good.
just getting the message out there about this business and how it runs and women-owned and different industries.
Okay.
Sharing information, your expertise, or a particular topic.
Second.
Connecting with
Okay. Someone who did that, not through podcasting, because this was pre-podcasting, Richard McCann. You've heard of Richard. He started off just doing, I think he was a guest actually, for one of the morning shows on WRVA, and they'd hit him with, home improvement problems. And that branched out into a show. And he's a fairly entertaining guy. He was, he was kind of funny, and he ended up getting his own show on WRVA. You grow into it. Your first podcast is not going to sound great. It's your first podcast. The great thing is, not many people are going to listen to your first podcast. Okay? Don't be afraid. When you get one, it's good. Once you've gotten comfortable, share it on your existing social media feeds. If you have a website, put it on your website. I do our podcast for Drive Smart Virginia. There's a link to the podcast at the bottom of our homepage. And the podcast distribution site that we use is called rss.com. I recommend that simply because it's simple and it's not expensive. They have a way, if you want to add that to your website, you give the link to your webmaster every time you put up a new show, and they put it in, and it'll just show up as it's a really pretty box. It's got the logo or whatever you use as your art. So you can put it on your website. You can drive viewers to your website to get to the link to listen to the podcast. Or rss.com also puts it up on Spotify, iTunes, any aggregator you can think of. And you can add more. If you've got somebody, well, I can't get it on whatever, you can add it. And once you've set that up, which isn't hard, rss.com walks you through. After that, you just upload the audio, type in a title and description, and you go, and that's it. It uploads it, it does the processing, and usually within a few hours, it's uploaded to all the other, Spotify, iTunes, all that stuff. It's everywhere. If you don't have to give somebody a long HTML address for your podcast. Just say Google, whatever, or search for it in iTunes or whatever, and they'll find it. So, content. Podcasting is great for branding. Home improvement. And it's also good for team building. If you got somebody who's really good at one aspect of home improvement, one employee, they're the expert in this. Bring them in, you know them, talk to them. Just ask them questions about what they do. And maybe here are some common problems that we've run into that clients have brought us. How do we solve this? What's the toughest thing? The best interviews, and I did it for a long time, the best interviews are just a conversation. You've got to be listening to what the other person is saying. If you have a list of questions, that's fine. But listen to the answers to the questions. I hear professional journalists do this all the time. They'll ask a question and they'll hear, or you'll hear an answer. It's like, wait, follow up on that. And they don't. They just go to the next question. That's horrible. It's a conversation. They say something interesting, follow up on it. You may not have all the good questions. They may pop up while you're having a conversation, but the best interviews are conversations. Don't worry about mistakes. It's a podcast. The more live it sounds, the more people like it. It's not supposed to sound polished and prepackaged, unless that's what you're going for. But most people, you really don't need that to get your podcast up and running. You can add the bells and whistles to it later. Some things you might want to think about: if your company has a logo, use the logo as your image. All about branding. Okay, put that brand in front of them. Every time they go to the podcast, they should see your logo. I wouldn't worry about bumper music. Bumper music is the music you hear at the beginning and end of the show, or coming in and out of commercials. It's a podcast, you don't have commercials. Don't worry about that. But you don't need it. You can do what's called a cold intro, where you just start talking. Welcome to my podcast. Here's what we'll talk about today. Don't go into a long, detailed description of what you're going to talk about. I don't know how many YouTubers I've seen where they'll spend the first 5 minutes of a 15-minute YouTube video telling you what they're going to tell you. I don't care. Just get to it. I came here to learn how to fix a washing machine. I don't need a speech, right? So don't, just get to it, get to the conversation. And I wouldn't even worry about having a set time limit. I used to do a 30-minute program once a week, every week. Some of the guests weren't really good. You can ask a question, they'd say yes or no. That's horrible on radio. That's death. It was like a boxer carrying somebody for 9 rounds. It just gets exhausting. Sometimes an interview's over when it's over. You'll just feel it. There's nothing else left to talk about. Wrap it up. Thank your guest. Doesn't matter if it's 10 minutes, 30 minutes, or 50 minutes. If the content's interesting, people will listen to it. If it's not, and you're carrying somebody because you've got this 30-minute goal that you want, people aren't going to like it because it's not going to be interesting. It's going to be obvious that it's forced. Let's see, what else? Oh, I was going back to bumper music. Don't worry about it. If you want to add it, there's a way to do it. There's music on the road console. I'll show you. And one reason not to worry about it, at least yet, is be careful about copyright infringement. Okay? Don't use an image or your image that somebody's going to, and they'll find it, folks. It's called spiders. They send these trackers out all over the internet. We got caught, Drive Smart Virginia did, because we posted presentations someone did at one of our conferences onto our website, because we do that. We host them after the conference. A spider found that he had used an image that came from copyrighted source, one of the big photo companies, and they're strict. They'll find it. And so they came after us. They wanted the licensing fee from us. And it took a while to get that untangled. It wasn't our fault. We didn't know the guy had used copyrighted material. But that's why you don't want to do anything that even, if you have to think about it, don't do it, you know? So if you want to add music, there is bumper music on there. It sounds fine. You got some goofy sound effects and stuff. But yeah, I guess let's get into some questions and find out, aside from that, you know, well, even the technical stuff before we go into the studio and look at how it works.